So we've been at this several months now, and we can track the locations of our listeners and their downloads down to the city and country. I mean, it's not creepy. We can't find you at your house, but we can get the city and the country. And to our pleasant surprise, we're not just a phenomenon in the United States, but 10 other countries, 4 continents. So let me please just say, willkommen, benvenuto, bienvenido, bienvenue, konnichiwa, merhaban, namaste. Because in any language, we're glad to have you with us on the Back Nine.
This is the Back Nine with Dennis Williams and Josh Mora.
Dennis, my friend.
Au revoir.
No, that's goodbye.
I know.
At the end, we have a lot of stuff to accomplish over the next few minutes. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Right.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Well, you actually were born in a foreign country.
I was born in Belgium. I don't know any of the 3 languages there, German, Flemish, and French, at all, because I was there 8 weeks.
What's wrong with you? They're like 8-week courses. You could learn a whole...
Yes, as a toddler, between 0 and 8 weeks, you could probably learn a whole...
That's when your capacity for language learning is the largest, probably.
My parents really dropped the ball.
I know, you had
really
such an opportunity.
have to have a conversation with them after this show.
Yes. But how you been?
I've been great.
Yeah?
I've been great. It's been awesome to see the feedback of this, and the countries is funny, but it's great to hear from people, and our shows so far have been really good, and looking forward to this one too.
Yeah, the analytics are really interesting because I've been tracking the states over the course of the episodes that we've done, and I'm not sure that there's one that we've missed. I'm not sure that I've seen Hawaii, but I think, look, we're Florida-based. We have family and friends in New York and Illinois and California and Ohio, and maybe that's where we're getting a chunk of fans, but we see them all over the country, and that's really encouraging.
Well, I think it's important, too, to point out, and this is really helpful, is when people actually download and they don't just stream it. So follow us and download this. It's really helpful for us to see where people are coming from, and the only way to see that is if you actually download on the platform you're listening to. So I do know a lot of people just stream it so that those analytics aren't as prevalent for us, but yeah, so download and follow.
Well, yes. At this point, I had a lot of languages that I had to speak there, right? So if there were more, that would have required a little longer
That was
intro.
So well done. I am so impressed.
I practiced so hard on all of the and the inflections.
I don't fail to impress me.
I don't ad-lib these things. Sometimes I do, but not that one. Not when it was something that was that important. You don't want to offend anybody who's from one of those countries.
So how have you been?
I've been really good. I've been really good. A few things have happened since we record this, obviously in advance of these playing and being available to our audience. So since our last recording time, and there may be things that we record today that actually play ahead of this one, but I left my job after 14 years, so we have that transition. We'll talk about that at some other point. I'm telling people I'm retired. I'm not really retired, but it's kind of fun to be in that experience.
It's funny that you mentioned retired, and we will get into it. We have a whole nother show dedicated to these kind of transitions that you're going through, and I've been through them, and the reinvention of our careers. We won't get into that in this show, but it's funny that you mentioned retired because I literally feel like I've retired from 2 careers, the broadcast on-air career, and then I retired from my sales career and started my own business. So I kind of have 2 retirements under my belt, but this is like coming out of retirement.
Yeah, in a way.
I've actually pitched this, is that you and I came out of retirement for the show.
We have said that on the show, and it has been fun to do this. And yes, I want to spend more time on the podcast, but that's not the reason for this retirement. It's just a lot of different circumstances that we will get to on another topic and another podcast. However, this one deserves our full attention, and it's totally off the topic that we've just been talking about. But I wanted to bring in a woman who I think is remarkable. I've met her fairly recently. Her name is Carolyn Moor. She is the founder of something called the Modern Widows Club. And if you're in our audience and you might be wondering, how does that topic relate to the Back Nine? I think there are a handful of things. And Carolyn, by the way, hello. We'll bring you in just a second to answer this. But I think there are a handful of things to talk about here, right? We're at an age where it's no longer rare for us to be losing our peers. It's more common than we'd like. Still not common. And so we all have to deal with loss. I'm not talking about loss of our parents. That's also another topic, how we care for and get through that. But we have lost peers. And so the idea of bringing Carolyn in and to talk about widows is manifold. It's understanding that there are going to be widows that intersect our lives. Maybe they are friends of ours who've lost their husbands, or maybe it's the wives of people who have been friends of ours for years and years. We may run across them in dating at this point in our lives. But first, Carolyn, I want to talk about loss in general, and I want to talk about your story and what you're able to share with us about how you came to the Modern Widows Club and founding that, and the objectives of what the Modern Widows Club does.
Right. Well, thanks, Josh. Thanks, Dennis. It's wonderful to be on your podcast after listening with all the others. You know, my story is shocking. You go out for Valentine's Day, you are on your way home, and someone crashes into your car and causes you to have an accident that ends up causing severe head trauma in my husband, and dies on Valentine's Day 12 hours later. No one can expect this to be their story. It happens because accidents are just that way. For me, I was young. I was 37. I had a 50-person interior design firm here in Central Florida. My daughters were 2 and 4 years old. I mean, no one expects their life to experience something so tragic. So for me, it was really just, I needed to find other women who were my age, who were professionals, who were mothers. How do I do this? And unfortunately, it took me about 10 years before I found a real community of women. I just started asking deeper questions. Why did this happen to me? Why couldn't I find the support I needed? What kind of support would I want? And that's really what led me to creating Modern Widows Club. It was just a simple idea where widows could share what they've learned and sit in some non-judgmental, quiet time together and ask hard questions, because it's a hard reality when you suddenly become widowed. Yeah.
What are some of those questions that you ask yourself, and how did you help each other get through it? What did you see in other people and then in yourself to get through it?
Well, for me, I immediately parenting solo was huge. I had only been a stay-at-home mom for 1 month. So I had only taken on the entire household responsibilities for a month. And so suddenly I'm responsible for a business, I'm responsible for a household, and I'm responsible for solo parenting. So parenting was my very first concern. It wasn't myself. It wasn't even my business, to be honest with you. It was, how do I get my children help, because they're crying and they want their daddy. They don't understand why their daddy's not coming to put them to bed. And it's very practical at that point. Children don't understand death. They don't understand permanence. And so their grief journey is very different than mine. And so that was, I would say, parenting was primary. Yeah.
How have they, over time, knowing that was your first objective, how have they dealt with loss, and how have you been able to guide them through that loss?
We're very fortunate here in Central Florida. We have a grief center here for children called New Hope for Kids, and that's actually where I first showed up. And now that my daughters, it's been 24 years, and so now my daughters are grown. What's interesting, as I was thinking about this morning, and I said 24 years ago, I made a commitment that I was going to keep my children first and foremost in all I do. I was going to honor the name that I carry more. And I was going to find a way to love again. And those were my 3 promises to my late husband. And so it's kind of gone that way. And my daughters today they see me differently now that they have started to find love. And we had our typical 15 to 25 rocky years, which everyone goes through that. But I think when you don't have a partner to stand up for you, it becomes a struggle to be respected as a parent, as authority, because to be quite honest with you, they're just tired of listening to me.
Right. So how did you make that transition? Because I know of one widow, my parents' age, who lost her husband at a younger age, probably in their 50s. and never remarried. And right or wrong, I'm not going to judge whether that was a choice or why, but a lot of people can't ever do that. And I just wondered your thoughts on that and how you were able to transition, because it's an important, and it's got to be just a really difficult step.
Mm-hmm. Well, love is a broad term, is what I like to say. You can love a lot of things. And it was really a sort of a journey. What could I love? Well, the first thing was a cat. The second thing was a sports car. The third thing was travel. You start dipping your toe into things that actually bring you joy and bring love, and a way for you to give love back, right? And so it starts in the areas where there's not a lot of high risk. And then it gets, of course, deeper and deeper. Maybe that's a relationship. Maybe it's a new career. All of those things require a different level of commitment, of passion from you. And so a lot of our ladies choose not to repartner, but a lot of our ladies actually can't find a partner. And part of that is just mathematics, because from the age of 40, the female population is only 1%. But by age 85, it's 73%. So the older I get, the fewer choices there actually are for me to date a partner, in my instance, a male, right? So for some women, they would rather commit to a cause or commit to a family and commit to those other things that give them a sense of wholeness and love. So you have to identify what that is for yourself.
We'll be right back. Friends, I want to tell you about a really exciting company called Peat Learning. Peat is dedicated to helping organizations of all sizes optimize their training initiatives. They specialize in enabling the development of AI-powered courses, which can then be tailored for all kinds of corporate training needs. Peat Learning offers a suite of customizable and extremely cost-effective solutions that enable companies to deliver personalized workforce learning to their employees. Put simply, Peat is an indispensable partner for any evolving company. So visit Peat Learning at peat.com. That's PETE.com.
If you need a benefit auctioneer for your next fundraising gala, hire Eric Goodman, who's broken fundraising records all over the country. Josh and I have known Eric for over 30 years, and he's one of the most passionate, energetic, and hardworking people we know. Eric's consulting strategies and successful fundraising techniques is why he raised $1 million in 10 minutes at a recent event. Visit yourfundraisingteam.com to see a video of his work, testimonials, and then book with Eric today so your nonprofit can have a record-breaking night.
All right, back to the show. For the men who would date widows, what are some of your thoughts about or counsel that you would give them that might be different from just what we might be used to dating in the general pool of available candidates?
That's a good question. There's actually an author out there, John Polo, and he wrote a book called How to Date a Widow 101. And I'm friends with John, and I love his book because it is different. It is very different, and it's different for the female and it's different for her partner. For us, I can tell you that if widows get remarried, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, it's somewhere between year 6 and 7. That's the average. For men, if you become widowed, it's year 1 to 3. So men and women are in different trajectories. Women want to find who they are again, and then they want to be able to offer that person in a new relationship. Okay. That's what our dating club at Modern Widows Club specifically does. It teaches women, who are you now? Who are you offering? What do you want to offer? What do you want different? Right. And how do you honor this love that you had with your partner and bring that forward? And many people who have remarried, a lot of our widows, it's a sense of sort of a threesome. Right? You're always going to have that person there. Luckily, hopefully they've had a loving relationship and they wanted to carry that forward. If they didn't, which is sometimes the case, they want things to be different. But the open communication and the ability to be honest, there's a higher capacity for that when you're dating a widow, because she's going to be very straight with you, especially if she's coming from our organization. She's going to know, she's going to ask some tough questions up front. Mine, when I was 30, it was like, do you want more children? Well, that was a non-negotiable. I didn't want more children. So dating in my 30s and 40s and 50s and now 60s, completely different experiences. So it does matter the decade too. Yeah.
And so just to follow up, one thing that's really important there is making room for the fact that there was somebody else in a partner or the person that we're dating's life, and making sure that they have to not be threatened by that, to recognize that that's something that's going to be important in all likelihood to the woman that we're dating.
The more you love with us, the love that we experienced, the more you are going to be loved. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think what you touched upon was a lot of things that we talk about on this show. In order to be ready for another relationship, you have to survive the trauma. And that trauma can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. In this particular case, it's from a widow, but you can have a lot of trauma, and you have to get through that and be able to have the kind of joy and be the kind of person that you need to be whole for that next person that you're going to be with. So I think that's a really important point, and it transcends just widows, right? You have to survive lots of different traumas in your life to be the best partner and be able to live with yourself. I mean, I think what you said about spending 6 or 7 years before you are with somebody else, I mean, that's significant. That means you're really digging into you're able to live with yourself. You're able to live alone. You're able to live with a lot of your own feelings. That's a powerful thing to bring to a relationship, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's what we've learned actually from studying widows is if you do not know what your new identity is, you're at a very high risk of attracting narcissist. You're and codependent people. Okay. So this is what our research is starting to show, is that this is extremely important for women to have resources to be able to rebuild this identity. And our research shows it takes around, guess what, 6 to 7 years, exactly matches the actual data that when women really are actually getting married. So there is something to that.
I would imagine too, Carolyn, that not only for men who would be dating widows, but just supporting widows in general as friends. I mentioned at the top, we have friends who have unfortunately passed away, and trying to stay friends with their wives or women that we were friends with who've lost their husbands, whatever it might be. What are the other ways that men can be supportive, even if we're not interested in dating? Again, the example of the wife of a friend of ours who's passed on. And what were some of maybe the specific examples of instances where there were men who were platonic friends or relationships of another kind were supportive of you?
We call them golden friends. And widows need for people around them to protect them because they don't always see, because of brain fog. A lot of widows have brain fog for about 2 years. So they're not thinking clearly. So they may want to engage in a relationship really just to reduce pain. Just to reduce pain and the isolation and the loneliness. It is very crippling in the beginning. So sometimes that's, what happens. So staying close and staying in contact and maybe even volunteering to be there when maybe someone comes over to work on the house or mentor their children. These are all really important aspects of what a widow is really looking for. Having another person kind of come into your internal space creates a lot of anxiety for widows.
I was just going to say, so for somebody watching this or listening to this right now, 1 year in, 2 years in, 10 years in, and they've never really dealt with this, what should they do? What should they do? What should they take away from this time right now? And if they're listening and this is like the light bulbs going off because they're hearing from you.
The science shows social connection matters. You learn from other people. You become like the people who you're around. That's what makes Modern Widows Club so unique. It's inspiring. It's motivating. It's uplifting. It's completely different from what anyone widowed has ever experienced. And someday we'll look back and we'll look at all the research of what's happened with women and we'll say, my gosh, I needed to see someone that was further along than me so I could emulate them. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get there, but I could watch someone. And so encourage them to get into a community. There's actually no excuse because we have global virtual communities that anyone can plug into. We have a travel club. You can go and travel with hundreds of women anywhere in the world. Yeah.
What are some of the other functions there? So you've mentioned a dating club, you've mentioned a travel club. What are some of the other things that women will experience if they're part of, and again, even though it's Central Florida based where you are, it is a national global organization, right? So again, what are some of the activities that they could find and some of the other services that Modern Widows Club provides?
Well, what's unique about it is we're actually a women's health organization. I mean, a lot of people will try to fit us into the sort of grief world, but we're actually what happens after you leave the grief support. So it's how do I craft a new life that has a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning, and at the same time honor the person who gave me so much, right? Gave me and would want me to have a life. And so we have communities, we have 22 communities around the country. Many of them are virtual. Some of them are specific to suicide or maybe Black widows or Spanish-speaking widows. We really listen to our widows and ask them what they want. We do a lot of surveys. And so we have an art club, a book club, a travel club, a dating club, and a parenting club. And so these are all niche areas where women needed actually specifically a little bit more support. And what we had to do was we had to find widows who were past their second year who could come and become leaders and facilitate those groups. That's our hard job. But when you show up, you receive very specific support in those areas. And so a lot of the ladies will hop around, depending on what the trajectory is of our life. For me, I would have loved to have had a dating club. To be quite honest with you, my big struggle was financial. Every time I went on a date, it was $50 for me to actually get a babysitter. So I couldn't actually financially support dating as an actual activity in my life. And so for the men, always volunteer to pay the babysitter if you're going out with someone who's widowed, has kids.
That's a very good point. I think it's interesting because there's all different types of widows. You mentioned suicide. I can't even imagine how different that group is. As such a thing that touches almost everybody's life in some way. But to be a widow of somebody who commits suicide, that's a whole different story and a whole different group and a whole different kind of trauma.
It is. And it wasn't my experience. And so my role is to find the right facilitators for that. And it's it's actually not a problem. Unfortunately, suicide is a problem. It's more of a male issue than it is a female issue. It's not even in the top 10 cause for women and death, but it is for men.
So for women who would want to join the Modern Widows Club, or for men who would want to refer friends to the Modern Widows Club, how can they find you?
We are at modernwidowsclub.org, and we actually do refer. If we have widowers come to our organization, we partner with an organization. So we always try, if we can't provide something, then we always partner with someone.
Well, that's fantastic. Carolyn, really an enlightening episode of The Back Nine. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story and sharing your resources. I know it's going to impact our audience quite a bit. And I look forward to catching up to you next time I'm in Central Florida.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So that's Carolyn Moor of the Modern Widows Club. And Dennis, that's really fascinating. I mean, there's some things that we don't necessarily think about when we think about being at this stage of life, right? And the kinds of things that we might encounter. Like when we're getting divorced, we don't think about the dating pool as having women who are anything other than never married or previously married. But I know I didn't enter that space thinking I'm going to come across women who have lost their husbands.
Right. I mean, whoever expects that, right? That you're going to walk into that situation. I think what's important to me is that, gosh, there's almost an answer for everything now. There's almost somebody who's been where you've been, and there's a group that can help you. I think of the generation that came before us, and they were told to just grind through it. And I think that's why a lot of people, and I referenced someone I know not remarrying, there was probably a stigma to it, or there was just not a group that they could connect to, or things like that. Same thing with surviving suicide. It's just get quiet about it. You don't talk about it. It just goes away. You hope it goes away because you don't talk about it. So I think our bringing this up and what she's doing, and then having the connections to other groups if they can't help you, is significant. I think it's significant part of why we're doing this show too, is to make people realize that you can talk about this stuff. You have people who have a like mind, like situations, whether it's this or something else. And again, I think that's new to our generation. I think the other generation sort of just, I guess for lack of a better term, thought they were sucking it up and being quiet and not talking about it. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing that I would take away from this particular episode is if you find yourself friendly with a widow for whatever reason, or dating a widow, to make sure that there is room for that, the person who's passed on, right? I mean, just because they're not there doesn't mean that they weren't significant and impactful and positive in that woman's life. And so it's important, and especially if you're dating one, and especially if you're dating one who has kids, to know that you don't have to be the dad for those kids. They've lost their dad. You just need to be a positive male figure for them.
I think that's absolutely right. You need to be, and I should mention too that the little brother that I had from Big Brothers Big Sisters had lost his father, and that's why they came to me back when I was in Buffalo. And my little brother Shane, and I never tried to replace his dad.
Right.
I tried to be the guy that would play basketball with him, show up for him, teach him some things like how to shake a hand, like those kinds of like things that a father would teach. I try to help him through as my little brother, but I never thought I was going to replace his father in any way, shape, or form. That was just not part of it. So that's the same type of thing. If you mentor somebody who has lost a father or a parent, you can't replace that person. You can only just sort of provide some quality to their life and some value to their life and some mentoring.
Yeah, I think and the last point I would make is when you find yourself in a relationship with a widow, again, maybe it's platonic, maybe it's romantic, that there are things that they need, right? I mean, that support. Can they live their lives fine? Can they have a job? Can they raise their kids without you? Of course they can. But there are going to be pieces of support that they need, emotional support. Carolyn referred to something as simple as financial support just so she could be able to go date, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind. That it is a special kind of relationship that's going to be different from other women that you're involved with that are friends, other women that you might be dating. And so recognize that, own that, step into that space.
I'm proud of you because you know that well.
I do.
I'm
That's
proud
correct.
of you for that.
That's right. I have some experience with that.
I'm proud
currently.
of you.
So, well, that was a really interesting episode. She's terrific. I'm so in awe of what she's been able to do, not only for herself, but then to extend that to other women. And I think provided a lot of instruction for us guys who are in that topic as well.
Yep, and I think there's some great takeaways, and I think we delivered them. And I think the greatest takeaway is there's something out there for you. If you're going through this, you don't have to go through it alone.
That's right. So thanks again to Carolyn Moor. If you're looking to refer somebody or if you're looking to find it is modernwidowsclub.org. She was a great guest. We have more guests coming up this season as we continue on The Back Nine. We'll see you then.
We're really happy that you could join us today on the Back Nine podcast, and we're really trying to build a community.
Yeah, so please not only listen, subscribe, follow us, download, share with your friends that you found something in our community here.
We really, really appreciate everybody who's downloaded even a single episode and shared the time with us. We know your time is valuable. Please also give us a 5-star review if you can. Thanks so much.
So I've mentioned Three Bridges Consulting. What they do is they market your company. They lead the creative, they find the audience. What they produce, commercials, social media content, possibly even documentaries. It's long form, it's short form. One recent success story, working with a home services company in Chicago, a company that refaces cabinets. They launched a campaign in January. They had 5 times the revenue of their previous January and $1 million more in revenue than in any prior month after they launched this campaign. Once again, it's Three Bridges Consulting. The number 3, bridgesconsulting.co. The Back Nine is attested to by Janine Stella and recorded at Pixelworks Studios in Delray Beach, Florida.